Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Footy Travellers podcast.
Well, Kevin, welcome to the Footy Travelers podcast. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We are kind of meeting for the first time, face-to-face at least. We've been in contact a little bit through a shared endeavor of football fandom. You, myself, Mike, we all participate in some fantasy Premier League together. First question, how you doing this season?
I've only dropped one so far in the first half of the season. I have a strategy where I do tend to go with the top teams to begin with and let everybody milk their mistakes and weed themselves out. But I can't remember which game I didn't lose. I drew, and that's good enough in that. But I can't remember which one it was right now.
Okay. So it sounds like you're doing the Survivor League. Is that right? Do you do the head-to-head?
I'm doing the Survivor one. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't do the full fantasy league. For some reason I've never been very good at that, and I love the Survivor aspect of this one. I do other fantasy sports, but I always feel like I should do better at fantasy Premier League than I do, and then I get really angry when I don't.
That sounds very familiar. Yeah. I know exactly that feeling. I am miserable at it, and every year I'm like, I should be very good at this, given the fact that I watch enough and know the players, and then I think last year I was like bottom of the table. I would have gotten proverbially relegated if there was a relegation promotion system in this very large Premier League season. So I have now retired from that area, and I totally understand where you're coming from. I like Survivor a lot more as well, because then again, it gives you more of a rooting interest in one match rather than rooting for all these different players that pretty much everyone has on their own roster.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That is kind of the challenge. It comes down to differentials some weeks when you go head to head. You all have probably the same five core, but I'm the masochist. I'm doing both. I'm going to give it one more shot for the head-to-head fantasy Premier League. We'll see how I go this year. But shout out to the Game of Throw-ins head-to-head league, by the way, run every year by our fellow footy traveler, Andrew Frazier. Appreciate what you do organizing all of us footy fans for that. Speaking of fantasy, the three of us here, I'd say we all kind of share the fantasy of traveling for footy. I'll speak for myself. I'd do it all day, every day if I could, but here we are to hear about some of Kevin's stories and his experiences, not necessarily around planned footy traveling, I might say. I'll let Kevin clarify, but actually the amazing experience that someone can have when soccer finds its way into your pre-existing travel plans. Kevin, I think there might be some World Cup qualifiers involved here, maybe even a pitch invasion. We'll hear more about it from you. I won't spoil it too much. But I guess first off, tell us which two places you're going to tell the listeners about today.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to attend a World Cup qualifier for the 2006 Cup when I was in Argentina, in Buenos Aires in 2004. So I got to go to Argentina, Uruguay at the Monumental.
Okay.
And then in 2008, I went to a qualifier in Swaziland, which technically has changed its name to Eswatini, and they were hosting a game against Togo. The tiny, tiny country of Swaziland, which is, I think, what probably piqued your interest the most. I'm sure other listeners have been to Argentina, been to Buenos Aires, seen an Argentina national team game, maybe even been to a game there.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you'll have anybody that's been to a game in Swaziland, much less involving Swaziland. And that was really like the falling right into place situation. That was really exciting and fun.
You will definitely be the first to represent a trip to Swaziland on the podcast. So congrats there.
Got my Swaziland jersey on now too. And not many people will even have that.
I love that. That's awesome. Maybe one more question before you dive into the stories themselves. Help Mike, help our listeners understand what brought you to these places in the first place.
So I'm a lawyer. And now I work for a nonprofit that focuses on educating free speech for people. I'll just throw out the name just because it's called the Freedom Forum. And if you had ever been to Washington, D.C. and went to the museum, We were the primary funder and operator of the museum, right? But before that, I spent 25 years as a media lawyer, representing primarily journalists and newspapers and television and radio stations. And somehow I got hooked into this program that the Department of State has called the Speakers and Specialists Program, and they will send people, send people to embassies overseas. The embassies get a discretionary budget; they're allowed to bring in speakers to talk about topics related to democracy, and they wanted people in my areas, freedom of expression and freedom of information, on both of these trips and some others I've done, to come in and kind of talk to journalists, lawyers, judges, members of the public. You do media over the course of like a week or two just on this topic. So quite often when you go on trips like this, they will pair it up for 2 countries and send you for like 2 weeks. So I actually did Paraguay for 2 days, then had a weekend off, oddly, which is when I went to the game in Argentina, and then worked for 4 days in Argentina. And then when I went to Swaziland, I actually spent a week in Zambia, then had the weekend in Swaziland, which is when this game happened, and then did a full week in Swaziland after that. So that was a full 2-week trip in 2008.
Okay.
They're exhausting, but they're super fun.
They sound pretty incredible. Yeah. Wow.
And so what is your connection to the sport, right? So that got you there, but how has soccer been a part of your life prior to maybe this, larger responsibilities with your job?
Yeah, so I can't remember a time it hasn't been a part of my life. Actually, though, I will admit I probably got a later start than some people. I remember I joined my first team when I was 7. I had just turned 7, which I know a lot of people are younger. I have a 5-year-old now, and he's been playing for like 2 years. But I grew up in the DC area and specifically was born in Washington, DC. But by the time I was in school, I was in Montgomery County. And in the 70s, when I grew up, Montgomery County had a really good youth soccer program called MSI, Montgomery Soccer Incorporated. And I was playing in that. And I'm 5'5" now. I am not a big person. Basketball, off the table. Football, off the table. Soccer clicked, though. From game one, it just clicked, and I loved it. And I played throughout my life. I was still playing into my 40s in an open men's league. But as we talked a little bit before we started, my big thing was that I started refereeing when I was in high school. My club coach made my team take the new referee course so we could get a better appreciation for the game all around. And it really stuck with me. And I started refereeing as well after I graduated from law school. And I've stuck with that the whole way through. I've actually gotten higher as a referee than progressed higher as a referee than I ever did as a player. I did referee in I have refereed college games and even the odd USL game. I'm on my downside from that at my current age of 52 and haven't been doing as many games, but still mostly higher level adult amateur games in the DC area, which is a pretty good level of competition, and some of the MLS Next, which are the developmental programs for the MLS teams, which is some of the top I think youth competition in the country. So I've always been really interested in the game from every perspective, as a player, fan, referee. It's always been around me and something I really it's always been a part of my life.
Nice. So then as you take, I guess, this first trip to Argentina back in 2004, tell us about how you figured out that there was a game happening that you wanted to go to, and what did that look like as you integrated your love of soccer into this trip?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, some of these, I'm not the seasoned worldwide footy traveler that some may be, but I'm an opportunistic footy traveler, and I search for chances to go catch games wherever I can. My wife and I were in Spain a few years ago, and I dragged her to a Champions League match because I had never been to a Champions League game. We were in Madrid, and it wasn't Real, it was Atletico hosting Roma, and she was game. And I was like, it's just part of what you do when you go. To me, at least, being a soccer person, it's like if I find myself and there's a game there, I'm going to watch it. Even on this trip in Paraguay, I happened upon like a amateur rec game in a park. They literally were using milk cartons to put lime down to mark the fields. And it was like a tournament of some kind. And I stood there for like 2 hours just watching and hanging out. So that's what I do. I show up and I see it if I'm in the right place. And I got invited to do this trip. And oddly, I was thinking back as to how I ended up even asking the question of the embassy, like, can I go to this game? And it was because when they gave me the dates, the first thing that went through my head was, oh no, I got tickets to a U.S. qualifier while I'm gone at RFK Stadium here in D.C. They were hosting Panama in that same World Cup cycle. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to go to that. And so that's what triggered me to look at the schedule in Paraguay and Argentina and say, well, I wonder if there's a home game there that I could go to. That would be actually really so much cooler. And there was. And I wrote to the embassy. I said, I will do this on one condition. I get to, you guys find me a ticket to that game at the Monumental on Saturday. And that, that was a joke, but they laughed it off. And I did the same thing then. So every other trip I've done like this, I've done a few of them to other countries for U.S. embassies. And I'll always ask the embassy staff. And in Swaziland, what was really wild was that not only was the game happening, it was less than 3 miles from the hotel. And pretty much the entire embassy staff was going. Yeah. Both Swazi and American staff, because it was really the only thing to do that day. Yeah. It was a huge deal. So they were like, sure, well, we already have staff going. We'll come pick you up from your hotel and take you right to the game with us. You sit with us.
That's awesome. Okay. So pretty easy to find your way there, given the context you're in, at least.
For that one, yes. For Argentina, they had an embassy driver, and that's a whole different story as to what they wanted to do there. But
well, tell us.
It was a matter of just asking the question.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the story and the experience when you're in Argentina. I looked back at some of your pictures, and I was initially confused because I saw them playing a team in all red kits, and I had to go back and look.
Yeah.
And I realized later that Uruguay did have an away all red kit back in that year. But I don't know, what was the stadium like? What was the crowd like back then? Any solid moments of play on the field that you remember? Just tell us a little bit more.
So it was interesting because it was a bit of a downtime in Argentina, I think from a foreign fan's perspective, because you'll notice if you go back and look at the team sheets from that day, a name that hadn't made it onto the scene yet, a guy who's playing in Miami right now, Messi, had not joined the Argentine national team at that point.
Yep. And
other players that I knew from growing up, especially. Another part of this is I'm a huge Argentina national team fan and have been since 1986. So the opportunity to see them in their stadium, I consider them my second favorite national team after the U.S. So I was really excited to do this, and I had followed them for years and years and years. And these are obviously the very post-Maradona days. But they hadn't gotten to Messi yet. So that's one thing that I took away from it was not a collection of stars by any stretch. The names on the team sheet that day were not necessarily big names. The game was played at the River Plate Stadium in the Monumental, which is Monumental is almost about right, because when you think of monuments, you think of stone. And I just remember it being this huge, kind of older, like big, like concrete building, concrete stadium. Yeah. It's not the Bombonera over at the Boca Stadium. It was just like this huge, what you would think of as a foreign stadium with just like, wide open, no covering. You probably saw from the pictures a huge track. So it seems just immense. And then you still have the fans right on top of the fencing. They still had some fencing. So the first experience of that was, it was very different than any other stadium. As I said, the embassy was very cautious. I guess they didn't know what my experience would be, or maybe thought I had none and was just kind of like doing this as a tourist. And they insisted on having the driver drive me right up to the entrance of the stadium, and then told me I had to leave the game early before everybody else started leaving to meet the driver to be taken out, because they thought it would be too dangerous, the crush of the crowd and all this. And I was like, look, I've been here before. But the game itself was also kind of turned into more of an experience of just watching the atmosphere than the game, because Argentina went up 4-0. They had 3 by halftime, scored the first and the second half and I think, it was pretty much done, and everybody knew it was done. They were well on their way to qualifying already. That game put them, in second place, I think, about the midway point. It was pretty clear they weren't going to get caught by enough teams to not go in. So, they were still, despite the lack of names, were pretty strong, but it wasn't much of a game, So I started kind of like turning my focus to things like the crowd, to just instant plays on the field, trying to get an interesting picture or two here and there. I do remember I'm my club team that I've supported also, oddly, since 1986 is Manchester United, and Gabriel Heinze was playing left back for United and left back for Argentina. So I also tried to, and that was my position also was outside fullback. So I focused a lot on watching him play as well. I remember really he was very attack minded that day because they had nothing to lose and they could do that.
Yeah.
So mostly what I was trying to do was trying to just sort of like, especially by the second half, kind of got a feel for what the fans were like, what the atmosphere was like, what the announcements were, that they were making in the stadium and how people were reacting. I definitely remember that it was Lucha Gonzalez had gotten called. He's a River Plate player, and he had gotten called up and actually scored the first goal in the game. And every touch of the ball that he had that day, that the crowd was going crazy.
Okay,
that was their guy for the day for sure.
How was your Spanish, or how is your Spanish? I mean, how easy was it to kind of tune into
Spanish
everything around you?
College, so I did. I minored in Spanish in college, so I could pick up on just about everything that was being said, especially and certainly the stuff that they were writing on the scoreboard. I could totally understand. So that wasn't a problem at all.
Nice.
So were you sitting by yourself, or were you sitting with folks from the embassy? Like, what was
this one was just
kind of
me.
thrown in the mix of it?
Yeah, that's fine. It was just me.
Yeah.
I had a pretty good seat. Like I think they managed to hook it up pretty well. I still had to pay. I think I paid $50 for what was a pretty good midfield seat, maybe 2/3 of the way up, kind of where I like to sit. Anyway, I'm not one of those people that likes to sit right by the field. I like to see things develop a lot.
Yeah.
So for me to sit further up is better. And again, my refereeing background also plays into that. I like to think about things, see all the angles and see where the referee's moving in relation to the players on the field. So I also did that in the second half. Really kind of started watching the refs handling the game, especially in that one because these are two border rivals and things. And at 4-2, things could have really, or 4-0, things could have really gotten out of hand. I have a saying that says if a game gets beyond 3 goals, nothing good can happen from a referee's perspective. Yeah. So I started watching how he managed the players too.
Gotcha. Okay. That game ended up 4-2, I think. Is that
4-2?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm on here on my phone, just kind of looking at some of those the lineup and some of the names, and noticing Zanetti and, like you said, Lucho Gonzalez. No Crespo that game, I guess.
No, and I think they had subbed him out from the previous lineup. I was looking at something too, one of the match reports to refresh myself, and I think they had just taken him out of the team recently.
Yeah. Maxi Rodriguez was in there though.
He was
at the age of 23 at that time, but yeah.
So did you follow orders and leave early and get to the car, or did you get to stick around and maybe experience a little bit more?
I was never on the table. I was totally going to hang out and, I was just going to always be there for the whole game. That wasn't an issue. No.
Were you wearing neutral colors at this game?
No, I definitely had an Argentina. Like I had an Argentina jersey.
Yeah. You're probably safe that way, given it was a home game.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so. And like I said, so when I was 15 in 1986, I went to play in a tournament in Toronto, and we were housed by a family of Argentine expats. You're like a younger player. You go stay with one of the players from the other teams. And it happened to be the weekend of the 1986 World Cup finals when the Maradona-led Argentina team won. So I was kind of hooked into Argentina as a team I was going to support for a while. That was like a wild experience. So then again, it comes kind of full circle. I find myself in Argentina. Of course I'm going to ask. I'm just going to ask, what's the worst the embassy can say in this situation is no, you can't do it. Okay, well, fine.
You tried.
But they said yes.
So that was, I wouldn't call it a trial per se, but like trial by fire, or just thrown into the fire with that family, drinking from the fire hose, I guess.
In 86?
Yeah.
That was fun. That was quite an experience itself too. That was pretty cool.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
So then 2008 comes along, the next cycle of qualifying. It sounds like you're doing similar work still. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
Got another great opportunity. And of course, now, as I said, first thing I look at whenever I go to a country, and it can be work or anything else, is what's on the schedule. Like what games could I possibly catch just while I'm there in a certain place. And so, that was the first question I asked. And this one was just met with open arms. Oh, absolutely. The whole staff's going. We can get you a ticket.
Join the party.
They're not going to win, but they're not going to win, but it'll be fun.
Well, that was what I was going to ask is, do we actually have any knowledge of the number of times Swaziland has been in World Cup qualifying? Like, has even gotten to that point? Because I, I, I can't say that I'm surprised that they have a team, but like, because I know they do. But I mean, I think it's a fair question to be like, is there even a chance that you would ever be able to see a match with them especially one of that significance? So that's like very cool. Colin and I always like to think about percentages of like the number of people that have done something like this. Like, I can only imagine that you are in a very, very, very small percentile of people that have seen a Swaziland World Cup qualifying match in Swaziland. Like, as an American.
As an American, other than people who work there, it's probably very true. Yeah. I don't know how far they've ever progressed in this. Obviously, they've never made it to the finals themselves. And until Gianni Infantino completes his money grab and expands to 164, maybe it'll never happen. But no, I mean, I can tell you this. According to the people I was with, Swaziland had not won a game, an international game, friendly or qualifier. This is what they told me, in 6 years. They had drawn some, but they had never won one in 6 years. And they're going up against Togo, who had been in the 2006 World Cup, one of the qualifiers from Africa, and had Emmanuel Adebayor from Arsenal, and had a player, another player I think was at Dortmund at the time. And Swazi's had, I think, they said maybe half the team, and I don't even think it was that high. Maybe half the team was playing in the South African Premier League, but most were domestic.
Yeah.
Which will tell you just like the huge difference between the two sides.
So I was able to find one little nugget real quick on Wikipedia. Eswatini, as they're now called, entered the 94 World Cup qualifiers for the first time. Yeah. But they ended up in second place behind Cameroon, thereby not advancing to the final round. So,
yeah, I don't think they very much do ever.
Yeah, great question though. That's a fair little piece of trivia there, Mike. Good call.
So maybe give us a breakdown of the difference between this experience that you've had in Swaziland versus maybe the Argentina one. It sounds like you had a much larger contingency of people that wanted to go to this match with you than the Argentina one.
Yeah, and oddly, we showed up a lot earlier. Maybe they just picked us up earlier. Everything was different. Honestly, everything was different. Like I said, from the talent level to the result. Spoiler alert: the Swazis won at home. Hey. So both times we had a home team winning, but it was a massive upset versus the expected Argentina, win in Argentina. But the stadium is tiny. I showed you guys pictures of that. It was also beautiful. I mean, it is no bigger than I'm sure there are high school football stadiums in Texas bigger than this national team stadium. It has an entirely dirt parking lot. People were just pulling up and parking wherever they could, and you just walk in and I think I said I paid $50 for a quote VIP ticket in the middle. We had literally probably what I would consider in Argentina. And we had literally what I would consider perhaps the best location. Honestly, we were exactly midfield, exactly 2/3 of the way up at this game in Swaziland. The ticket cost us $14. I mean, it was like the best seat in the house.
That's ideal.
And people were there early. It was pretty decent. Like I said, I mean, there I'm just kind of looking around the stadium just looking at the background of the mountains, that are out there. And it's a very open stadium with one stand on one side and then one at the end. And just watching fans and people were really done up. They were really excited. We were there for the whole of warm-up. So we got to see both teams warm up. Again, there I was focused very much on Adebayor and watching his body language, especially. He seemed very loose. He seemed very confident. He did not know what was about to happen.
No. Apparently not.
Yeah, because Swaziland goes up 2-0 in the second half and then holds off after a late Togo goal for this just massive upset. And I think people kind of sensed something in the air early because when it got to halftime at 0-0 and Swaziland was totally holding their own. Their goalkeeper had made a couple of really good saves, but they really weren't overmatched at all. It wasn't like they were just being bombarded and were just playing for 0-0. They were trying to give back as hard as they could, as I remember. And then they get the goal. The first one, I think, was kind of like a deflected ball that kind of ended up going in. The second was a legit goal. And then, as I recall, the Togo goal was a goal-mouth scramble because Togo's just throwing people forward. It's like the 88th minute.
Yeah.
But throughout this, especially when it gets up 2-0, all the embassy staff are joking me. They're like they're calling me Muti, especially the local staff. And Muti is witchcraft.
Oh,
so they were saying that I was like witchcraft, and they were telling me, they said, if this holds up, we're gonna have to fly you back for the next game, And I'm there for it. I'm like, why not?
That's the golden ticket right there.
Yeah, we're all getting
just lean into it,
sucked into the excitement. And boy, when they won, it was just kind of this sort of shock.
Yeah,
and then jubilation. Again, they hadn't won in so long, and the next thing you know, and of course, this is the best part. Next thing you know, people are just kind of starting to run out on the field. Fans, after I feel like after Togo had left the field, but the Swazis were still fans. The Swazi team were still out there celebrating, and the fans just start pouring on the field and celebrating. And the wildest part is, out of nowhere, somebody just rolls out a DJ booth. I don't know where they got it, but with the speaker system and everything, and the thing turned into like a huge dance party
that's amazing. On
the field. It was definitely one of the coolest experiences I have ever been a part of, without a doubt.
That's awesome.
I mean, it was like another, like, how I just stopped for a second. I was like, how did I get here to this? No one.
So did you go down onto the field and join the party? Yeah.
Of course, I put my camera away for that one, but I definitely hid that underneath everything and didn't take a lot of pictures from there. I took them as everybody was running out on the field. I kind of took some, and apparently they got fined for this by FIFA for it's like $200,000
throwing a dance party on the field. Yeah, I think that
invasion
probably
is not looked upon highly. No.
Yeah.
So the other part of the story is that, and we can come back to more about the game, but the other part of the story is I was actually staying at the same hotel as the Togo team. And saw some of them the next morning, and they weren't happy. I remember because the hotel spanned both sides of the one long highway that kind of runs through the country. There's two big towns, Mbane and Manzini, and then this was right in the middle in this valley, right between the two. And my part of the hotel was like the not as nice part, the government rate part. But you had to go across the street and up to the main hotel building for breakfast and stuff. And I went up there, and the Togo team, I guess, was getting ready for their bus. That looseness, that jubilation, they were actually fighting with each other. There were words being exchanged, and I was just kind of like, oh, okay, not get too close to this, because they were they were not happy. Again, this was early in qualifying, and they definitely chalked this one up as a 3 points, right? I'm sure.
Right.
Yep.
That was another interesting part. I did not ask for any autographs.
That might have been a little awkward.
So one of the things that I love about going to, I guess I would say the word obscure soccer matches, is those moments of sort of like, you don't know what might happen, and then the country sort of bands together because of it, and especially small countries like that. So it reminds me, I randomly found myself at a Panama match, and it was a qualifying match against the U.S. A handful of years ago. Went with a friend of mine, and then Panama beat the U.S. in that match. And my friend's wife was a teacher at this local school, and we get up the next morning and she's not at school, and we're like, what, why aren't you at school? She's like, oh, the country pretty much just canceled all
holiday
school and classes and everything because of how big of a win that was. And everyone just essentially gets this new now free holiday. And I'm like, God, that is just something about that I just love, because that would just absolutely never happen in our country. So at least, you get to enjoy it. So did Swaziland have a reaction like that? Did they do anything kind of over the top to, did the party continue, I guess, after the on-field invasion?
It did. And I mean, well, the part of it though, is that it's like, Swaziland's a super poor country. I don't know how much, there really was to party. And it's also a very, despite these two cities, rural country, and I wasn't staying in it. So I do think the party continued. I do recall that there was some kind of permissive holiday the next day. It felt a little slow. We were working. The government did not officially shut down. We were working because I was there. But yeah, there was that attitude, and people were talking about it all week. I think a lot of the places I went, the embassy staff who was introducing people were like, he was at the game on Sunday, And that was like the big talking point, aside from the work we were doing, was like, no, he was there. We're going to bring him back for the next game because he's the one. He's the Muti.
That's amazing.
Well, so it sounds like your experience at these, definitely at the Swaziland game, the Eswatini game, I don't know, I'd say it gave you some clout amongst your peers and help you build maybe some stronger connections because of your, shared experience with football. Outside of these two experiences, have you had any other similar experiences where that's kind of been a result or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I use football as a connector all the time. Whether it's, again, I'm in a city like DC, I get into a lift or a cab and the driver is quite often not from the United States. So we'll start talking about where they're from and we'll start talking. Invariably, that's what it turns to soccer. I do a lot of programs, though I haven't done a foreign program in a few years due to COVID and a couple of job changes. Since I was originally on this list, I have done a lot of programs on the other side where the State Department has something called the International Visitors Leadership Program, and they bring groups of journalists to the United States. And now I'm actually doing a lot with that program and speaking to them here. And yeah, we will interject some football references into the conversation. I come to a point where I might talk about a concept called the public figure concept, where you're allowed to scrutinize celebrities a little more. And I'll use this example. I always find someone from a particular country to talk about. Like the other day, I was speaking to a group of 23 African journalists, and one of them was from Ivory Coast. And so I was doing I made up a hypothetical on the fly about a story about Didier Drogba.
Yeah.
And that someone had written. You Chelsea man?
Yeah. Love Drogba.
Yeah. So I'm just like created a hypothetical where I dropped Drogba in and that because it's universal, right?
Yeah.
It's something that people understand and connects us. And so I always look for those opportunities. Absolutely.
Your anecdote about speaking to cab drivers and really anyone that's from a foreign country and starting those conversations is like, I use that anecdote all the time because that is how I use football in my day-to-day life, is a connecting piece. So I love that because it's, as someone that, you've traveled a lot, you are able to understand like how easy it is to make a connection with someone when maybe on face value you are probably like, I have no way to know like what it's like to live in Swaziland, to be in this field or when doing whatever. Like you have to find some way to connect with them, and the beauty of it is like the world sport typically is that entry point, and then it opens the floodgates to other areas to talk about, right?
Well, it's actually got me out of trouble once, at least, too. So I was in this trip I said where I went to Madrid with my wife, and we went to the Champions League game. As we were flying out of the Madrid airport, I got pulled aside for extra screening or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I am trying to talk Spanish to the guy who's screening me, and we're just kind of talking. He's very matter of fact, and he says, "Take off your hoodie." And I was wearing a zip-up hoodie. And I didn't even think about it then, but I might do it more when I travel internationally now. I had a Spanish national team jersey on underneath, and it said Xavi on the back. It was number 8 Xavi. And a friend of mine who's Spanish had gotten it for me as a gift after they won the World Cup. And because I said at the beginning of the Cup, I said Spain's going to win the final over Holland that year in 2010. And he was so excited that he thought I must have had something to do with it. So he gets me this jersey. It was really nice. And the second I unzip my jacket and take it off, the guy looks at me and he goes, Xavi, and he starts laughing. He goes, "Go ahead." He's just like waving me on right there. Yeah. I don't know if he was actually done with his stuff because I had finally taken the hoodie off, but I like to think that he saw that jersey and said, "Oh, this guy's good. He's good."
Yeah.
He didn't pick, a big name. He picked the guy, one of those, not role players, but the guy who nobody really favors, and he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's true, but it did get me moved on for sure.
I love that. I have a Xavi jersey as well. He's one of my favorite.
I'd call him a legend at this point. Era. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, yes, right. He pulls the strings for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is a little off the cuff, and maybe it's a large question, but Kevin, give Well, I'll back up and contextualize my thought process a little bit. Here we are, three Americans who I would say we get it. We understand the power and the beauty of soccer and its ability to connect us to the rest of the world, whether that's through just traveling to places, connecting with other human beings along the way, getting us out of airport security issues. Give me your best pitch to someone who doesn't get it about why maybe soccer is the best sport in the world from a diplomatic point of view.
Oh, wow. That's a tough question. You did put me out of left field with that one. I think I think it's because sports connect us generally, and this is the most popular sport in the world.
Yeah.
That's the easiest part of it. We are, and I think in a lot of those countries, another part of it for us coming in as Americans is it shows that we want to understand their culture or we appreciate their culture. If it's a very cultural thing in that part of the world, when I go to games overseas, if people pick me out as an American, it's less and less now that, because more people are engaged in footy travel. But I went to Euro 2004 in Portugal. That was my planned vacation with some friends that year.
Nice.
And I can tell you, there were not a lot of Americans at the Euros back then.
Yeah.
We ran into a couple of people we knew who also, but that was it. And I think there is an appreciation from people that we are taking the time to learn their culture. There is an appreciation that we're meeting them on a common level, even if we don't understand the team. We don't agree on the team, I should say. But the third part of it as well is I think that we, I lost my train of thought. I did it. There was another part of it about just engaging. It was about just sort of engaging and being a part of this. It helps you understand culture, right? So, everybody's probably either read How Soccer Explains the World or Footballing Against the Enemy, where the stories of Celtic versus Rangers and how they fit into geopolitical concerns are the source of
that old firm game. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's true just about everywhere. Every country has that kind of story, and and I think there is a lot of truth in although we've gotten globalized and maybe lost some of this from the game. Every country kind of has its style that reflects who they are in a way as a people too. You learn a lot about people at the games, and you learn a lot about people by just sort of talking about the games with them. And they always want to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they find out you're American and you love soccer. So I have that too. I went to a Manchester United game. I'm a United guy. And I went to Old Trafford for a game with a couple of friends. We were taking the train back to London. And there were these guys it was after the game and hitting the sauce a bit. And they weren't hooligans, but they were just, they weren't that, but like we knew we weren't afraid for ourselves or anything, but they were kind of running up and down the aisle, kind of engaging with people, some of whom didn't want to be engaged with. They definitely had one too many. Yeah. And they came up to us and they're kind of like, oh boy, we just kind of want to get back and go out in London that night. And they're like, hey guys, what's going on? And, we're like, all right, hey, what's going on? Like, wait, where are you guys from? We're like, we're from America. And they're like, well, you came all the way over here to see a game at Old Trafford. This was 2001. Yeah. And like their mood totally changed. Yeah. They sat down with us. They bought us beers. They were giving us copies of like their fanzine. Everything changed. And we started asking them a bunch of questions about things, not just about United and history of United and talking about, but just general, like where should we go out in London tonight? Things like that. And it is like you said, it's that connector. So, it's really what I look to it for is that one common ground that I have, even if I don't speak the language, right? You're in a game and you see people and you don't have to speak the language to understand what they're thinking a lot of the time.
Yep. Mike, I'll let you say it about language and soccer.
Yeah.
There are two things that I feel like you're probably alluding to. Yeah. One being that I think language, I use jerseys as a language or a connector to start people a conversation, as your stories have as well. But then also one of the things that comes to mind and I almost feel uncomfortable sometimes about it is there will be times when I'm supporting a team that say, for instance, when Colin and I were in Russia for 2018 World Cup, because the United States weren't in it and some of the other kind of secondary teams that we supported were also not in it, we decided on being Belgium fans. And we were at a match against Algeria, and we were in Belgium jerseys.
Was it
in an Algerian
Tunisia
or Tunisia? Excuse me. Yeah, it was Tunisia.
Yeah,
and a Tunisian fan said something to us in French, and knew that it wasn't necessarily very pleasant. As you said, sometimes you can really tell, even though if you don't speak the language. And then he said in English, "You guys aren't even Belgian," and so then there's that inferiority where you're sort of like,
Yeah,
but I love the sport, right?
Yeah.
I love the sport, and I love the game, and I love this team. And I think that's where, to your story around sort of the Man United fans, I think the way that soccer is growing its popularity in America, there obviously are going to be a lot more Americans traveling internationally to go see teams. And I think what used to be an anomaly, like your situation where they're like fascinated by you, is going to be less frequent and will be more, I don't know if it's, I mean, I think English fans often, I've run into them being maybe a little bit less interested, or feel like an American fan supporting an EPL team has less credibility because they just think that we randomly pick them out of, the most popular team or what have you.
Plastics.
And they think of us as plastics, right? Which, sort of annoys me because yes, that is a element of the sport. But also the fact that like Colin and I have varying team allegiances for certain reasons, not because of recent success or things like that.
Right.
But I do think that it's sort of an interesting thing to be like the country that's outcasted in soccer, because we are the one that everyone's like, you're American and you like soccer. Like, that's weird. And I kind of like that. I like that it's a unique point to, it makes you sort of have a fun story. I always tell people, like, if two people are wearing NFL jerseys walking down the street in America, they usually don't strike up a conversation because that's just like what you do. But if there are two soccer fans wearing various jerseys walking down the street in America, you're most likely going to make a comment like, and that's a kickoff point. And I think that's just like, I almost don't want the game to get to a point where we can't do that, where it almost is like if two, if there's a Chelsea and an Arsenal fan walking down the street in London, they're probably not going to have pleasantries and they probably won't make a friendship out of it. Whereas if that relationship happened in, say, America, that encounter happened in America, you may actually have some substantial like relationship come from it.
The initial comments might be naughty, but you'd get to the point where you're like, oh, well, at least we're both, footy fans.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. As I said, I deploy the references in some of my presentations, and I do that because I think it not only does, I think, establish a little credibility with the foreign journalists, but I also don't preview it very much. I don't say at the beginning that that I have a connection to the game, and then when I drop it in the middle, I try to. It usually comes at a part where we've been talking for a while. Maybe their energy level wanes, and you can see also wait, did he just say Drogba? That sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, it is. It sparks the conversation in a way that way too. Yeah. So I agree with you.
Yeah, Mike, I thought you were going to drop just your simple, football is its own language.
Oh yeah, that is my old adage. Yeah,
your tagline.
Football is its own language, because it does. The number of times we've met people where they, in a lot of stories that I feel like I really enjoy hearing from people, is similar to what you were talking about, going in and walking into some pickup games in foreign countries and not speaking the language, but you can just step in and your game sort of is your credibility. Your game is the interest of wanting to play a pickup game with strangers, and the ability to keep up with them adds the credibility and allows you to talk. And I think that's kind of a beautiful part about the game too. It's like, you don't even need to know how to speak that language. You can use sounds and hand gestures or whatever.
you just actually reminded me of another situation like that one. Holy cow. So I'm in Amsterdam, 1998, New Year's, 1997 to 98. And we're hanging out in the city, going around trying to, going to different places. And, there's just festivals all over the city. This is not at a game experience, but it feeds into what you said. And there were all the street buskers, the soccer buskers who do the juggling and, tricks for money.
Illusion, Michael. Trick is something a whore does for money.
And we were just kind of hanging out and watching one of them. Then we started chatting with him, and he and I just started playing the ball back and forth. And I have one trick in my repertoire that I can do very well, and that is hold the ball on your foot, lift the ball into the air, and swing my foot over and catch it on the other side. So once around. And I did it, and and he was trying to do it, and he couldn't do it. Like he had never done that one, and he couldn't do it. And my friends were like, "I'm trying to teach him." Unbeknownst to me, a Dutch camera crew had been filming New Year's Eve festivities and caught that. And the next morning, we're in our hotel room, and I'm on the news doing this.
Love that.
I was so hungover that I didn't actually appreciate. Like my friends, we were all just sort of like, "Was you right?" And I'm like, absolutely, because that's my only move. Like that's my only good trick. But so we built we built this. We didn't. I mean, he didn't. I don't think he was even Dutch. And so, yeah, we just kind of built this like nonverbal connection for just a couple of minutes, kicking a ball back and forth. Right.
I love that.
It's totally true. My one move, and I pulled it out perfectly.
That's awesome.
Oh wow. Well, Kevin,
I think this, find the opportunities when they come and take them is all I can say. Right. That's what I'm doing here. Like, look, I don't travel as much as I used to. I haven't had, I really haven't gotten to go to any of the last big World Cups, but I've tried to, like, when it comes, I'm not turning it away.
I think that's a good piece of advice for sure. Well, Kevin, this has been absolutely fantastic. Sounds like we got some extra stories along the way from your travels and your experiences as a fellow footy traveler over the years. Thanks again for joining us. Good luck to you as you trudge along in your Survivor Fantasy Premier League endeavors this season. Mike, you're still alive too, right?
I am alive by the skin of my teeth after this weekend. So,
Would you have Spurs this weekend?
I did, yeah.
Oh wow!
I think as did I.
That was.
I had Fulham. I rolled the dice. Ooh. I was going to go Spurs, and I went with Fulham this past weekend because I was like, "This is the one where I might be able to take a chance."
Yeah. I pretty much was. I saw the score line, and I was like, "Well, that was my third strike. I'm out." And this is. I was just like, "Whatever, I'm conceding." And then I was like, "Well, let me just like turn it on," and I turned it on in like the 80 or the 95th. And I saw the first goal, and I saw the second goal, and I was just like,
"Yeah,
how did that just happen?"
Very Spursy.
It was very Spursy.
Yes,
It was. But no, well, hopefully we'll be able to get a chance to potentially meet up in person because I'm in Baltimore. So
cool.
I popped down into DC a good amount, and hopefully there'll be opportunities, even though Baltimore and DC did not get the chance to be hosting in 2026. I would imagine that there'll be people coming up to the Philly area or elsewhere.
That I plan to do. I blame DC. Baltimore, the bid should,
no offense.
The bid should, no, I mean, look, I do. The bid, look, we never were going to get, we're going on a tangent, I realize.
Wow, tangent away.
DC was never going to get,
we love them.
DC was never going to get the cup with the games probably being played at FedEx Field outside the city, which is a terrible stadium to go see a game in and not convenient. And DC had hosted games in 94, and they should have just put their bid behind Baltimore and done a fan zone in DC. Baltimore's got an unbelievable soccer tradition. I mean, I'm a DC guy first and foremost, but no one can dispute that Baltimore has an incredible tradition around the game and really should have had the opportunity to host, this.
Well, you're giving me chills because this is like, I was part of the Baltimore kind of volunteer committee to try to promote it. And I think I completely agree with everything you say about DC's host. And I think it's even funnier that the week 1 NFL game that happened last year when the septic system busted onto fans was when FIFA was analyzing host cities. And so then that was before DC and Baltimore joint bid. And so then they were like, "Oh, we're gonna do a joint bid with DC," and I was like, "Don't attach your train to that cart.
Right.
That's an awful idea.
Don't you infect us?"
Right. So no, it's it was real bummer because I was hoping if they did get to host, then there would be a potential that there'd be a greater investment in the city, and then therefore potentially get maybe an MLS team or something. Because I mean, the Baltimore Blast is one of the best indoor teams in the country in the history of indoor, and so
strong history of indoor soccer in Baltimore.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a shame. And I mean, we've talked about this a lot on the pod, and I feel like I constantly talk about it with people that are in Baltimore about, the loss of not getting that bid country or the host city bid. But I mean, now it's just a matter of making sure that people show up to any other, friendlies that happen here and things like that, which it does. It has a very high viewership.
Absolutely.
Show off.
The TV ratings every week in Baltimore, especially like Premier League games, is way up there.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, again, this has been absolutely fantastic. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait until maybe the Women's World Cup and see if we can't get some games in our hometowns.
That would be nice.
Listeners, a huge thanks to you for tuning in, listening to Kevin's stories. Get out there, get to games in your own hometowns, get out there, footy travel, share the love of the game with people you meet along the way. And until then, as we say, be loud,
be proud,
and be good to each other.